So he had already liked my profile, which that means
She
I was
always
just the
say
first.
we matched
No,
first.
baby, we matched, but I was the first to message.
I didn't know who she was at the time, but like the first thing that I saw was that she just had a bunch of followers.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. This week, we're talking about a story that's been all over the news and social media for the last week or so concerning Jonathan Owens. Now, Jonathan Owens is known for two reasons. The first is that he's a strong safety for the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, and the second is that he's married to Simone Biles, who is the most decorated gymnast in the history of the United States and arguably the best gymnast alive today. In a recent interview on the Pivot podcast, Jonathan said that he did not know who Simone was when he first met her a couple of years ago, and he may have suggested in some of his responses that he believes he's the bigger catch in this relationship. This resulted in a lot of various responses online, from hate to mockery to skepticism over him not knowing who she is when she's one of the most accomplished athletes in the world. In response to the criticism, Jonathan posted on social media saying he was unbothered, and Simone Biles expressed some frustration towards all the criticism that he was receiving for this interview. As for the court of public opinion, it appears to be split. A lot of people are still on his case for suggesting that he's the bigger deal in the relationship, and a lot of other people are saying, ignore the noise, you guys are happy, just do you. In this video, we're gonna look at that interview, not just the parts that made headlines, but we're gonna take a broader look to gain context. What kind of a person he is, how he communicates, is he being deceptive about not knowing who she was when they first met, and what did he mean with those statements that he made that seemed to have everyone worked up? Let's dive right in.
I was a late bloomer athletically. High school, I was a good player on the team, but I wasn't like totally sure of myself yet. I had long arms, like my hands was always big, but I was just kind of awkward, just limbs flopping all over the place. I honestly feel like I didn't mature athletically until like my senior year of college. That was when everything just kind of like worked out for me at the right time, you know.
Okay, I wanted to start with this clip because it's a great opportunity to baseline his behaviors, to understand how he communicates, and know what his values are, what's important to him. We're getting some clues here. The first thing I want to talk about is something that we see quite often out there, and it's a big trap for people who study facial expressions. And this is a great example of it. So on the channel, we talk very often about the universal emotions. These are the emotions that the research has shown pretty much everywhere in the world are expressed more or less the same way. So you can recognize these pretty much anywhere in the world. And one of them is contempt. Contempt is moral superiority, when we look down on something. And pretty much anywhere in the world, when we feel contempt, we see it as a tension on one side of the face. So whether it looks like this or like this, it causes a line on one side of the nose and some tension on one side of the face. That being said, there are quite a few people out there who, as part of their baseline, as they talk, occasionally one side of their mouth tends to go a little further up as they're talking. And it kind of flashes like this as they're communicating. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like that, while they're talking, normally not feeling contemptuous. One of the most famous people who has this as part of their baseline is rapper, producer, and actor Ice Cube. Every now and then, as he's communicating, one side of his mouth moves up a little more, and it kind of looks like little flashes of contempt, but it's not. It's just how he talks. And Jonathan Owens has that as part of his baseline. It's much more subtle, but we already saw it in that clip, and we're gonna see it numerous times moving forward, especially when they zoom in from the side, where his lip suddenly just kind of does this as he's talking. And because it's part of his baseline, there's no real reason to believe that he's expressing contempt in those moments. So I just wanted to mention that for the regular viewers who might see that lip go up later and go, oh my God, contempt, what's going on there? Just be mindful of the fact that this is often something that happens with him in normal communication. Now in this video, we're going to talk about something we don't discuss often on the channel, but we should. And it's behavioral profiling, which is something that I studied a lot when I was learning interrogation, but as a mentalist on stage, it's my bread and butter. When I bring somebody up on stage in front of an audience and I have to tell them things about themselves, the type of person they are, the type of relationships they have, how they think, and secrets about their lives that nobody could possibly know, a big part of how I do that is cold reading. And a big part of cold reading is behavioral profiling. It's based on the way somebody communicates, based on the way somebody behaves, to understand certain things about them and what's important to them. And in that short clip, we already have a lot of clues about the way Jonathan thinks and what's important to him. And as we move forward, try to make little notes about things that he values. What are things that are important to him? But in the clip we just looked at, we already see a sense of self-awareness. As he talks about his youth and how he was awkward and his arms were, flopping all over the place, he's very self-aware, and he's aware of where he's come from that and the progress that he's made. And one of the key words that he says is, I wasn't totally sure of myself yet. So the distinction he's drawing between that awkward phase that he had and where he's come now is being sure of himself. And we're gonna get a lot more clues about this as we go on, but confidence, being sure of oneself, is what to him makes the distinction between the way he felt back then and the way he feels now. So we can already start thinking about how that's gonna play into some of this interview.
That's like weeks ago on the field with the Patrick Mahomes and all of these guys who a young Jonathan would be cleaning their lockers. You ever reflect on those moments though? On those moments of cleaning just to be there, just to have housing, and now having an opportunity to play against people in those same jerseys?
I journal a lot just to write down things that happen, just so I don't forget them, so the memories stay vivid. But honestly, now I just feel like I belong there. We all have the same helmet on now. I've made plays in the league, so that's it just builds your confidence. But that's all I can say, man. It feels like I'm supposed to be out there. I have friends that I played with in college, man, that watch the games now, and it's just like you get that validation, like, man, you look good out there, you know what I mean? Right. But you don't think about it, man. You just out there playing fast, like, you just see a number. It don't matter, the name. I'm just, whatever my job is, man, gotta go execute it.
Okay, again with that clip, not much on body language, but another awesome opportunity to start understanding a little bit how he functions, how he thinks. So Ryan Clark is asking him a question that's coming from a place of humility. And I don't know how much you guys realize that there's an irony here, because Ryan Clark, the interviewer in this case, himself played safety in the NFL. So he's relating to his own experience and saying that when he first played with some legends, some people that he looked up to, it was a humbling experience because he thought back to a younger version of himself who would just clean the lockers just to have a chance to be around these people. Now he's on the field playing with these people. And so he asks Jonathan, do you have that same, do you reflect on that sometimes, to how you're playing with people that you idolize or looked up to or are legends? But if we listen to Jonathan's answer, it's almost like he's unfazed by who's on that field with him. It's almost like he's blind to their fame. So again, if you listen to the words, so what he's putting focus on, he says that, he worked hard to get there. He even says that he made some plays that build his confidence. So again, we're seeing this emphasis on confidence, giving him that identity and that reason to belong there, that reason to be there. And then he goes on to say that it doesn't matter who the people are, they're just numbers. He's there to do his job. He's there to execute the task that he's supposed to do. So already something is starting to marinate in my thoughts as I'm watching this interview, because I just saw the clips of him saying the things we're about to see about Simone Biles. And my gut reaction was, oh, come on, how can you say those things? It's Simone Biles. But now I'm going back and I'm listening to him talk about the opportunity to play with legends in his own field, in football, and he seems as unfazed by that. So we're already getting clues here that this man is unfazed by fame and accomplishment. Let's keep that in mind and move forward.
I've been cut 5 times, so you just have to keep going, and I always had a great support staff around me, man. I had older teammates that would see stuff in me that I didn't see in myself. They would just tell me, bro, just stay the course. I had my boy, he's like, bro, you're gonna be good. You just gotta, stay the course. And 3 weeks after that conversation, I get my first interception on Justin Herbert. And that was really the moment that changed my career, because now it's on film. It's not just in practice. And I'm one of the better quarterbacks, in the NFL. And, that really let me know I could do it.
I count myself very fortunate for a lot of the career opportunities that I've had throughout the years, not the least of which is that I had a chance to perform for NFL players at the Super Bowl a couple years ago in Miami before the game at the stadium for a Hall of Fame Legends party where there was a whole bunch of Hall of Famers that were hanging out. I had a chance to kind of see how they are and how they interact and what type of people they are. And I would say that all of them have a certain sense of confidence to them. And it varies. It's all over the map. It varies from very humble confidence to slight arrogance, everywhere on that scale. But they all have this confidence in common. And that makes sense because they're in a very, very competitive sport where thousands of other athletes would love to take their place. So there has to be a sense of believing in yourself to be able to make it in this industry. And we get a lot of that with Jonathan. Sprinkled throughout this interview, there are a lot of moments where he's talking about, things that he did that he's proud of. And we get this sense of pride and this confidence. And then we get some moments like this one where he talks about the support system that he had and he shares the responsibility of his success. And it's kind of nice to see that. And I'm curious to know from you, the viewers, where you feel he falls on this scale of like humble confidence to arrogance. Because we have moments where he's saying things like this, or, I have a great support system backing me up. And then we have some other moments that we're about to see where he's saying things where it's like, he's a big deal. He's the catch in the relationship. And also your opinion might fluctuate, right? Because right now you might think one thing, but then he'll say something about, oh, okay, well, no, that was a little more this way. And then you might go back that way. Constantly re-examining our conclusions, I think, is really vital in analysis. Otherwise, we're just stuck in a confirmation bias and we think anybody who says something that even slightly disagrees is wrong, and we've made up our minds based on one thing and that's it. There's no changing our mind, and I think that's just silly. So try to see where this goes and let me know in the comments where you feel he falls. Okay, now we're gonna get to the good stuff where he's gonna talk about how he met Simone and all the little controversial things that he said that made the headlines. And we're gonna look at what's going on. What are these answers? What is he talking about? And is he being 100% honest about not knowing who she was when he met her? But before we do that, do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content.
How in the hell did you pull Simone Biles? how did you do that, bro?
Man, it's really how she pulled me, man. That's the question.
Oh,
man.
Lord Jesus. Now you with Freddie. Now it's back. now
But
you
listen,
with
I'm gonna tell you, organic story, man. So I just got to Houston. I probably have been to Houston 7 months. And one of my boys are like, hey man, you gotta check out this app, And I'm like, nah, I'll check it out. Like, what is it? It was called Raya at the time. So basically it's like a dating app, but you have to go through certain like criteria to make sure that you're who you are. So literally have been on the app for a couple of days, man. And it's like, she pops up and I'm like, let me see who this is. Gymnastics, I ain't never, I never really paid attention to gymnastics. So it piqued my curiosity, So I'm like, okay, I'll see what's up. I swiped her and it said we matched. So I'm just like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna see what's up. So I go do my workout and I come back and I get like, I had some likes on my Instagram. Then I come back to my phone and then she messages me on the app like, hey, you know what I mean? And man, this gotta be fake. Like, I don't know. I didn't know who she was at the time, but like the first thing that I saw was that she just had a bunch of followers. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, she gotta be good. I promise you, I'm a real life story. When she won the Olympics, I was in college and we didn't have NBC, we didn't have Olympic channels, and we're in camp. Late July, early August, so I'm not paying attention to, so I never would have had a moment to where I would have watched like.
Okay, now before we look at that statement and look at the behaviors and what they might suggest, I want to give the lie detection disclaimer for anyone who's new to the channel. So, there isn't any single behavior or even a collection of behaviors that could allow anyone on earth to know with certainty that someone's lying. If anyone's ever told you that liars do this, so you can know someone's lying when they do this, it's incorrect, I promise you. That being said, there are behaviors that we know are tied to high stress and high cognitive load. In other words, means the brain is working harder. And we know that when someone's being deceptive, the brain is working much harder than when they're telling the truth. And when we see a lot of those behaviors happen at the same time, it's called a cluster of deception, and it means that there's a heightened probability of deception. It's more likely that there's some deception happening here, but we always have to ask more questions and get to the truth. It's also really important to consider the person's baseline. So for example, when we say someone's blink rate is heightened, we mean compared to how much that person normally blinks in the rest of the conversation. It doesn't mean that anytime somebody blinks a lot, they're for sure lying at all. That being said, let's jump right into this answer. So there are a few things that are starting to happen a lot more during this answer that were not happening before. For one thing, you'll notice throughout the rest of the interview up until this point, he often, as he was talking, would bring his hands close together like this. But we very rarely heard a sound like this kind of slapping or hitting noise. We didn't hear much of that. In the beginning of this answer, we start hearing that a lot. So as he's talking, his hands aren't just coming closer together like this, like they were doing the rest of the time, but all of a sudden we're hearing a lot more of this kind of sound.
I just got to Houston. I probably have been to Houston 7 months. And one of my boys are like, hey man, you gotta check out this app, you know? And I'm like,
now in the research, there's something called adapters, self-soothing gestures, or pacifiers. They have a lot of words because a lot of different research talks about them. And it's anytime we manipulate a part of our body to self-soothe, to relax us a little bit. And often they look like a massaging gesture. But sometimes for some people, it goes a little bit more than kind of manipulating, and it goes into slight self-harm. So we often see someone really scratching themselves to the point where we start seeing a lot of red, or we see someone like pulling at their skin or twisting their skin quite a bit. And we do see this kind of hitting oneself a little bit more in moments of stress, especially with people who associate physical pain or strain to progress. So in those people, often we see a lot of this kind of hitting themselves in self-soothing moments. Next, we have a lot more lip licking going on than he was doing before. So in the beginning of this interview up until now, we didn't see him lick the lips too often, but in this answer, he's doing it several times. Now, lip licking is in a cluster because when we're stressed, the mouth dries out, and we do this to correct that. Also, it brings more color to the lips and make us seem more presentable. So when we're presenting something that we think people may not buy, we tend to do that a lot to bring more color to the lips. Right in the beginning, we do see a face touch. And it's really interesting because it's not just a face touch, but the hand comes across the body. So it's also a blocking gesture because he's not doing it with the same side, he's going across to scratch like this. And this is such a great example as to why we need clusters, because sometimes a face touch is just a face touch. You know, he's got the thin braid, so it's possible one of them is itching his face, so he's just scratching that. It's possible that that's all it is, and that's why we need clusters. Any one of these behaviors could be something else. You might be thinking, oh, come on now, maybe he's just licking his lips because it's drier in the room, or he's been talking for a while. It's very possible. That's why we need the cluster. One of these things, maybe, two of these things, maybe, but when we start seeing a lot of these things, it just gives us reason to go, there's a significant shift here. And face touching does play into a cluster because there's a lot of research that suggests that when we are stressed and when we're deceptive specifically, the blood flow in the face changes, it shifts. And often that could cause an itching sensation, which is why with deception, we very often see a lot of scratching around the nose, around the mouth, up here. It's quite common in a cluster of deception. Then we have this really interesting over-specificity where he's giving a ton of details around not knowing who she is. Whereas someone who's likely truthful would just say, I don't know who she was, because that's just the truth. We see him, he prefaces it. He starts by saying, I didn't pay much attention to gymnastics. He's getting us ready for the fact that he didn't know who she was. But you don't need to pay attention to gymnastics to know who Simone Biles is. I don't pay attention to gymnastics at all, and I know exactly who she is. I think it's true of most people. Even after he says it, he goes on into how, you know, on campus, they didn't have this or that network, and he was at camp, and he was too busy to watch gymnastics. But again, denying that you don't know anything about gymnastics isn't a way to deny knowing who Simone Biles is. I don't know much about swimming, but I know who Michael Phelps is. I don't know much about basketball, but I know who Michael Jordan is. It's kind of the same thing. If you were to tell me like, wait, you don't know who Michael Jordan is, I wouldn't tell you I don't pay attention to basketball. It doesn't matter. These people's fame goes way beyond the field in which they perform that you wouldn't need to follow to know who they are. Next up, and this is really, really important, there's a conflicting narrative. He says there that he swiped and it matched when he swiped. And then he said he went to the gym and he came back and then there was all these likes on his Instagram and there was a message. That narrative is in direct conflict with the narrative she's about to give. So let's put that on pause, put a pin in that, because once she tells her version, which is literally the opposite of his, we'll revisit this. But just keep that in mind. Keep in mind the way he told it, which is that he swiped, it was a match immediately, he went to the gym, and then he came back, and there was some likes and messages, and that's how the communication started. But I think the number one thing he said that piqued my curiosity is when he says that he came back, he had a message from her, it said, hey, and he thought it's gotta be fake, pertaining to the message. So for me, that's where I would have asked the most questions, because we've seen this cluster and we get to that moment, that's where I would have really gone in after that. Because Why would he assume it's fake? If he has no idea who she is, he saw he matched, he went on his workout, comes back, she says, hey, why on earth would he assume it's fake? If he just thinks it's a random girl, there's no reason to think that's fake. Some girl on the app has said hey to you. So the fact that he would say that he thought it was fake when he saw a message from her would suggest to me that he knew she had some sort of notoriety, something. So with that, with the cluster that we're talking about, does it mean for sure he's lying? No, it never means that. These behaviors together indicate that there's a heightened probability for deception, but again, all that means is I want to ask a lot more questions here because something feels off. It's not a guarantee. Also, speaking of disclaimers, I want to say this too for new viewers. When I say somebody's likely being deceptive, it's not an attack. When I say someone's being likely honest, it's not a defense. As an analyst, I go through a lot of training to completely emotionally detach and just look at behaviors. I'm pointing out behaviors. So every now and then in my comments, I have someone say, oh, you know, I can't believe you're defending this person. I can't believe you're attacking this person. I'm not doing either. I'm just saying, here's what I see. Here's what I would want to ask. So if at any point you feel like I'm being defensive or I'm attacking, I assure you I'm not. It's my job to just look at the behaviors without letting them affect my opinion. It's part of the job description to not judge. So that's all I'm doing, pointing out the behaviors. That being said, there are a couple of things that are important about what he just said besides the cluster of deception. And one of them is in the way he was talking about the app. He didn't simply say, I was on a dating app. There were other details he had to say that were important to him. The first was to say that there were certain criteria, that the app had to make sure you are who you say you are. Then he slipped in there that he was on there literally a couple of days before he matched with her. So again, it's this idea that like, I'm not always on these dating apps. So he's suggesting throughout that segment that he doesn't need dating apps. I'm one of those people who requires a dating app. He does just fine without them. But you know, this was a special one and he was only on it for a couple of days. And I feel like this is a bit of an indication of how he feels towards, you know, meeting someone online or how it reflects on him. To where it's kind of important for him to say like, this isn't something that's a habit for him and this is a special one. Now let's talk about the part of that answer that made the headline. So that and something else that we're about to see are the two answers that everyone's talking about. And in this case, it's when Channing Crowder asked him, how did you pull Simone Biles? And he goes, man, it's really how she pulled me. So the easy conclusion there, the one where without any analysis, without any critical thinking, the easy conclusion is that he sees himself as the trophy, right? It's not how I pulled Simone Biles, it's how she pulled Jonathan Owens, right? And I can see that. That makes sense as a possibility. However, for a moment, let's consider the possibility that he doesn't necessarily mean she pulled me in the sense that I'm the bigger prize and she's the one who pulled me. But what he's clarifying here is that he wasn't the one who seduced her. He wasn't the one who originally started talking to her, but she's the one who started talking to him. So maybe it's not this big arrogant statement. Maybe it's just a matter of correction regarding who literally pulled who. Like, she's the one who started talking to me. Now, what I just said is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. I'm not defending him. I'm not saying, no, he's not what you all think he is. He's actually saying this. I'm just opening up possibilities for us to think of. It's very possible that at the end, this was an arrogant statement. I have no problem with that. But let's at least critically give every angle a chance and see how we feel without jumping to conclusions. So let's do that. Moving forward in our minds, let's have two columns. One column is where he's this really arrogant person who believes that he's the prize and she's lucky to be with him. And then in the other column, let's consider the option that he didn't know who she was, that he's confident, but doesn't necessarily think that he's a big deal and that she's the fortunate one for having locked him in. So as we move forward, we might hear one thing and go, okay, that sounds like this, and then something else here, and then a couple of things here, and then at the end, we could see which column we each personally feel is winning. And it might be different for different people, and that's fine too.
So you was really the catch in...
I always say we, the men, the catch, man. I always say we the catch, man.
Yeah, so she really booked you.
She did, though.
Is what you're saying.
Because I was fighting it. I was fighting it.
So So in truth, if I say this out loud, was Jonathan Owens ain't really want Simone Biles, is what you're saying.
At the time, I'm not going to say that.
That's what you're saying.
I was afraid. I was afraid to commit. I'm like, And the moment where I knew she was the real deal, we were going to, I think she had a gym invitational.
No, it was milk and cookies.
I was milk.
Milk and cookies before that.
Yo, went to get
Milk and cookies, and
Cookie spot in Houston, the #1 rated cookie spot.
#1 rated cookie spot, and it was so many. I think it was like a Sunday we went. It was all these moms, and they're there with their kids, and we walked past, and everybody stopped and just. Kids are like shaking, and it was like, oh my God, and I'm like.
You thought it's because you thought you were fine, huh?
Man, nah. This was funny. They asking me, they like, here, can you take this picture? And I'm like.
Okay, so there's a statement that made a ton of headlines, and rightfully so, because the host is asking him, so you're the catch. And he says, I always say the man's the catch. I always say we're the catch. And let's leave morality aside. Let's leave how we feel about that aside. Just factually, objectively, that is incorrect. I don't think any reasonable person can make the argument that in every single couple on planet Earth, the man is the catch. I can assure you I've seen a lot of cases where that is absolutely not true. Furthermore, I think it objectively devalues women, because what you're basically saying, unless I'm very much misunderstanding this, and maybe I am, but if I am getting it, it's basically saying that all men have more value than all women. That is the only way that it would make sense to say the man is always the catch. Is it possible that I and pretty much everyone who's talking about this online misunderstood? Like, could catch mean something else? Like, is there a world in which he means men are the catch because like women are the seductive ones, so they're always catching the man's feelings? I don't know. But in the way that he said it, it really sounds like an absolute statement that objectively and in fact cannot be true. Then the host says, so she booked you. And he goes, she did though. And he gets excited about that. Like, she did. Like, he puts a lot of emphasis on that. We see the face light up as well. She did though. And he starts really emphasizing how he wasn't ready for a relationship at the time. And she's the one who wanted the relationship. And then he goes on to acknowledge the level of fame that she had, which was like all these people recognizing her out there and how shocking that was. And he's gonna go on in this interview, by the way, to talk about how he wasn't used to that kind of fame, to where even outside of the country where they're traveling, she's recognized by people, and that's something you have to get used to. So if we take all this into consideration, it seems like this weird thing to where on the one hand he's going, men are the catch, so men are always the catch, but then he's acknowledging that she's way more famous than him on a scale that he had to get used to. And then to add to the confusion, we have that ambiguous statement of, it's really about how she pulled me, which it really depends how you look at it. Because it can sound like he means like he's the bigger deal, she pulled him, but it can also just be him specifying that, he wanted to be single and she pulled him, which we get a lot more clarity about in this answer. So a lot of this, but that. I do want to note how at some point when he's telling the story of how he knew this was real, she jumps in with a correction. And I want you to look at how he accepts that correction. Very often in relationships where there's a lot of bickering and a lot of ego, the moment there's a correction, it turns into this kind of passive aggressive, like, no, this is what it was, no. In this case, she corrects it. She goes, no, it wasn't that. It was, we went for milk and cookies. And he kind of leans in with a smile, and we even see an eyebrow flash of him, like acknowledging that, taking that in. These are the eyebrows of surprise, where we go, oh, right, is that right? Okay, so it's like he's taking this information, he's surprised by it because he didn't remember it that way, but he's accepting it and bringing it into the narrative. So all to say, it's not a huge indication, but his reflex isn't to immediately shut that down and be like, no, this is how it happened. He's kind of acknowledging that. So we're seeing a little bit of that in that moment.
We matched. I was just the first to message. As soon as I clicked, ooh, I like him, it matched. So he had already liked my profile, which that means
She always say we matched
No,
first.
baby, we matched, but I was the first to message.
Yeah, you messaged me. She messaged. She wasn't scared. I give her that.
I know what I like and I know what I want.
Y'all are young newlyweds. Don't let people bring that shit in y'all house. Don't let this man do that. Don't do that.
I'm not trying to bring them shit nowhere, Freddie. This man's a hell of a safety. He
only
will
the best
never
on the
be
planet.
as good as a safety as this little motherfucker is as a gymnast. You agree, bro?
And you know what? He might, because the other day I said, you know what? In a couple years, nobody is gonna call him Simone Biles' husband. They'll call me Jonathan Owens' wife.
Speaking of, I don't know if you saw it.
Okay, now she's telling her version of what happened on that dating app, And it's different from the version he told. Because if you remember the way he told it, he said that the moment he swiped on her, it matched. So for those of you who don't really understand how the dating apps work, basically one person has to like first or swipe first. Then when the other person swipes, if already the other person had swiped, it matches. It goes, oh, you have a match because this person already swiped or liked you. So in the way he told it, when he swiped, it matched. So she'd already liked him. Now when she's telling it, she's saying that when she swiped, it matched. So he had liked her first. So there's a bit of a difference there. There's a bit of a difference in the narrative. With his, he said that after it matched, he went to work out a little bit and then he came back to his phone. As opposed to being like, oh wait, it matched. Who is this girl? So already that didn't make sense to me. Like if it matched, why did you go work out, then come back and check her out? So that didn't make a whole lot of sense. With her narrative, it does make sense. That he would just go, okay, like, and then went to work out and came back, and by that time, she had liked and matched. That adds up a lot more. But it adds up even a lot more when we look at her behaviors. When she initially says it matched, we see this big emphasis. Eyes open up, eyebrows go up. And one of the reasons eyebrows go up like that mid-sentence is for emphasis. It matched. She wants to make sure to be very clear about that. Now he interrupts. He goes, she keeps saying that, but that's not the way it worked out. He's trying to say that she swiped first on him. But then she instantly and very confidently corrects that and goes, no. You swiped first on me, but I messaged you first. So she pushes back on that. And at this point, notice what he does. He takes the scapegoat and talks about, that's true, she didn't message me first. So he abandons that first battle. He abandons the argument over him having liked her first. And I don't know if it's an ego play or if he's just misremembering it, but this is the version I believe. Because of her confidence, because it just makes so much more sense that he would have liked her first, gone to work out, come back, and now, while he was working out, they matched. So all this to say that given the logic of the narrative, plus the behaviors, I very much believe her version of the story, and I would bet a lot of money that this is the way it happened. But the bigger thing here, the bigger indication here is that whether it's that he's misremembering, whether it's that he's shifting the story, whether it's that the story shifted in his mind, there are certain things about his initial story, about how they met, that are inaccurate. A little exaggerated, a little shifted, things have shifted in his head. It didn't even make sense the way he was saying this has to be fake. The sequence in which he knew who she was doesn't quite add up. So it's just making me ask a lot more questions about him not knowing who she was, because that whole thing has holes in it. At the end, there's a telling moment where Channing says this man is a great safety, but he will never be as good a safety as she is a gymnast. So that's a pretty solid diss coming from a colleague. He's saying you will never be as good at what you do as she is at what she does. And we're talking a lot about ego here. And if we look at it, I'm not saying his ego isn't hit or bruised. In fact, I would bet that it is. But if we look at his behaviors, he takes it well. At least publicly, he takes it well. He laughs at the statement. We see a lip compression with a smile, and his hands come up. And that's basically the nonverbal way of saying, no comment, I'm not going to comment on that. He's not on tilt. He doesn't fight back about it. Doesn't make excuses. Yeah, but this is different. Nothing like that. He just kind of playfully takes it. And then she says something really sweet. She says, in time, people won't know him as my husband. They will know me as his wife. And she gives this little humble little, chin down at the end. And the host even goes, that's so sweet. Like he's going, that's so sweet that you would say that. Like you've already made history. You will probably continue to do so, but it's sweet that you would say that. And there are moments, we see it even here in the way that they look at each other and the way they smile at each other. There's still some cuteness. So yes, there is ego in a lot of what he says. But again, let's try to be balanced about this.
And that was one thing, like the way that she handles it is, I just watch her, she has her times where she she'll take every picture, but then, if we're doing stuff and she doesn't want to cause a scene, like, especially sometimes at the game, she'll, right. I'm here for him.
She does support you, right?
I'm here for him. Like, I don't want to, so, and I appreciate her for that a lot. Like, she's helped me transition into the spotlight because before I met her, like, I was just a regular NFL player, so I can walk around the mall, people would, and that was all I knew at the time, but then when I got with her and I did see how, much in the public eye she is, how many people recognize her. I mean, we're out the country and, you know, we're still looking over our shoulder, you know.
Not much to say about that one. It's just a quick clip because I talked about it earlier, but I wanted you guys to see that, where he's talking about how she showed him how to deal with a level of fame that he wasn't used to. So when we're saying things like he's got an overinflated ego and he thinks he's a bigger deal than she is, if we just take a step back, we see her that as a matter of fact, he knows that she has more fame than he does, because he had to watch her to know how to deal with this fame on this scale. So again, there's a contrast there, because there's things he says that kind of make it seem like he thinks he's the bigger deal, but then right here he knows for a fact that he's not.
You know, had to work on myself, you know, because I did realize, like, I was confident, but it was almost like pretend confidence, just because I know I'm supposed to be confident because I'm in the NFL, you know. In my mind, I still hadn't proved myself enough. And man, we had that conversation and I went, you know, to the sports psych guy, just talked to him about it. And he just kind of telling me everything that was going on. And he told me about like imposter syndrome and just thinking that you are, you know, everyone else thinks that you're something else, you know, and but in your mind, you still don't feel like you deserve it. I was glad that she did get those couple years just to kind of decompress. And, you know, we took some trips, man, got married, and now it just looked like she coming out, you know, with a clear mind, you know, because she did work on it. She's been to the therapy. Shoot, I went to therapy because, you know, she does it, you know what I mean? We went to therapy together, and it was just something she not made it cool, but like, it was something that I know, like, this is something you really should. Like, cause I had never seen or like knew people that just go to therapy, you know, just, so seeing she's really the first one I really seen, and, you know, she'll have the online therapy, and then we did the premarital counseling and everything. She just opened that door to me.
So there's a segment that I believe should be talked about, maybe just as much as some of the things that are being talked about. You know, social media likes drama, they like the dramatic stuff, but what's going on here is important as well. First, in the beginning, he says that he had this fake confidence. You know, you're supposed to be confident because you're in the NFL. And that's a huge, huge, huge tell. It's a big piece of information he's giving us. He perceives being in the NFL as something where you're supposed to be confident. And this goes right back to what I was saying in the beginning. He sees confidence as part of what he does. Now he's confident because he's in the NFL. And he's in the NFL because he's confident. Whereas when he was younger, he wasn't sure of himself. And it also goes back to what I said about my experience with other NFL players. This confidence has to be there. He's saying it right there literally. So he's literally just telling us what he perceives as being important for his career. This confidence is important, which might explain a lot of the things he says. But then he talks about how he never knew anyone who ever went to therapy, but because she went, she opened his eyes to that, and he went as well, and they go together. And this is honestly something a lot of people can learn, that, you know, just because part of your upbringing doesn't involve therapy or know anyone who's done therapy, doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go try it out and discover the benefits of it. But the reason I think this should be talked about is because there's almost a contrast here between men are always the catch and she was the one running after me to like, yeah, she opened my eyes to therapy and we go to therapy together and I've discovered the benefits of that. And he's showing that appreciation. He's giving that credit where credit is due. So we could all have our opinions and we could say, okay, I'm going to focus more on that stuff he said that doesn't make any sense about men being the prize. That's nonsense. And you can let that skew you in that direction. Or you could look at this and go, okay, well, you know, that's interesting too, that he's giving her this credit and he's open. He's open to discovering himself a little bit more. Finally, for your consideration, before we conclude, given another interview that Simone did, there were a lot of headlines more or less along these lines. Simone Biles says her husband argues that he's the better athlete. And this has fueled the fire of people going, how dare he say he's the better athlete? She's so decorated. Everyone all over the world knows who she is. He's just an NFL player, blah, 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 blah. And this feeds into the narrative that he thinks he's the catch and just goes so well with those clips from the interview. However, this title and titles like it are highly, highly misleading because the argument wasn't on who the better athlete is as an individual. It's not better in the sense that like who's more known or more famous. The arguments were about between football and gymnastics, which one is a harder activity, which one's tougher. That's the argument. Because what she said on the interview was, we've tried to pin each other against on like difficulty, ability, and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, gymnastics is harder if he agrees or not. She goes on to say, but it keeps coming up every time. he has done my workout in the gym and he could barely do it. And then I went to their NFL workout and I crushed it. So the headlines seem to want to feed that narrative of like he thinks he's better than her, and he does. But it's not so much about personally in terms of fame, it's more in terms of he believes football is more athletically demanding than gymnastics. Just a clarity for your consideration. So to conclude, behaviorally, what do I think of this? First of all, in terms of morality, that's completely up to you. Which statements you give more weight to and which ones you believe you're gonna trust more is completely up to you. But behaviorally, what I'm seeing is someone who I think is stuck with some old programming. I think he was brought up a certain way. He had this tough guy way to be raised. Nobody goes to therapy. Men are the catch and all this kind of stuff. And some of that programming remains, but I see a willingness to work on it. I do see a connection between the two. There's these exchanges of like, you know, sweet smiles. She stood up for him on social media. She's still showing up to the games and being encouraging. She was saying nice things during the interview. It seems like there are some arguments. It seems like this ego that he has associated to the NFL, this confidence you're supposed to have as an NFL player, plays into the relationship and they bicker about it. In time, we'll find out how much weight this takes and if it blows up out of proportion and ends up destroying the relationship. Hard to tell at this point, but for now, it seems like whatever ego and confidence he has, she's still around, she's still happy, she's still smitten. And at the end of the day, that's all that's important. We often feel like when we see red flags, there'll be red flags for us. It's our place to jump in and go, Simone, you need to get out of this relationship. That is a toxic man. And as long as she feels like she can manage it, remember, she has the resources, she's seeking therapy, they go to couples therapy together, so she has the resources to work through this. She's a very strong woman. You don't get to the top of what you do by far by not having certain strength of character. So as long as she's happy, as long as she's showing up, she's smiling with him, it's on her to deal with this if she sees problems in the relationship. The moment she comes out and complains that his ego is too big and it's stepping over and she's unhappy or anything like that, that's when I feel there's a problem. But until then, it seems like whatever we're seeing, some red flags, at the very least, there's a willingness to be working on this. But again, it's totally fine if someone chooses to look at this and go, no, for me, some of the stuff he said there is way too egotistical, way too much toxicity there. That is not for me. I am not on this man's side. And it's also fine for someone to look at it and go, yeah, he said some weird stuff, but at the end of the day, it seems like he's working on it and he's growing, and none of this is wrong. So let's keep that in mind in the discussions in the comments, that just because something might be obvious to one person, it doesn't make it objectively true. A lot of things exist in a gray area. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A lot of stuff on profiling and really going into what he's saying more than the body language, which I enjoy doing a lot as well. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments. Wishing you all a very happy and healthy new year, and I will see you on the next one.